For us, the challenging part is on game days, we have to be great at identifying what is the wrinkle that they're doing this week that they've never done before. How are they trying to attack us? And is our game plan still really good? Or do we have to have some adjustments? So we will always practice some things that we'll install in fall camp, but we always have to have it in our back pocket, because if they go to XYZ, we have to be able to have answers.
Kevin May is the defensive coordinator at Seton Hill University, and he was recently featured in an ESPN article. And he joins us today to share insight into their innovative defensive approach that's rooted in the old flex defense. Coach May and I discuss some of the evolving strategies to stay ahead by tailoring their systems to players and their opponents, and we talk about the importance of structure, player involvement in learning, and the adaptability in tactics. Coach May explains their practice methods and the versatility he has to confuse opposing offenses, and we conclude with insights into game planning and the need to anticipate and adapt to opponents' strategies. Stay tuned for our Winning Edge takeaways following the episode. On today's Coach and Coordinator podcast, we're going to talk about innovation and thinking about how things develop for us, how we learn things, how we apply things to our own situation. And joining me to discuss that is the defensive coordinator at Seton Hill University, Kevin May. Kevin, great to have you here on the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be on. I appreciate you having me.
So, Kevin, I learned about you by reading an article on ESPN and saw some of the things you're doing. And the defense that you run has its origins in the flex defense. And as I told you before we got going, I said, man, I hadn't heard anybody mention flex for a long, long time. The Dallas Cowboys ran it. And I guess the most used version of it that I knew just growing up was the Desert Swarm with Dick Tomey and Teddy Bruschi at Arizona. So that's only part of the story, because while there's some foundations in the flex, you've kind of evolved this to something that makes sense for you too. So a lot to chew on today. But first, I guess for us, talk to us a little bit about what is the flex defense, at least in the traditional way, which I guess forms the foundation of this defense for you.
Yeah, the term flex itself kind of was created really back in the day when you were talking about back with Tom Landry and some of the influences back then, Dick Tomey, is really about flexing the D tackles off the ball. So they weren't traditional three techniques. They were flexed a little bit off of the line of scrimmage. And that kind of evolved into those guys being stand-up kind of hybrid linebackers that could be, do some D tackle-like things, but could also drop and add more flexibility. So, when you hear the term flex or double eagle flex, it's really talking about the defensive front and those guys kind of in some unorthodox alignments, whether they're true D tackle bodies or linebacker bodies. So just guys a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage than a traditional defensive configuration.
Now, I know you talked a little bit about this in the ESPN article, is, in learning this, the guys that you learned some of this from said, don't mess with grandma's recipe, right? Like, you need to stick to how this was designed and how it was intended. But I think with anything like that, that's assuming that all the parameters that were around when they designed it will apply to you too. And the fact of the matter is, in anything we do, offense, defense, special teams, techniques, things evolve to fit the people we coach and the opponents that we face. So when you get into studying things, it might start with something, but it's going to become uniquely you. And I think that's kind of what has happened here for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like you said, it's been a long time since you've heard of the flex being relevant. And I label our defense as the flex because that is very much what it all stemmed from. But it really kind of turned into our own identity, right? Like, we really morphed it into our own thing here. And yes, it started from the flex. And if you look at our playbook, there's still a lot of what I learned as the flex defense. And you mentioned, I was told, don't change grandma's recipe. And for a long time, I was pretty stubborn with that. And then, like you said, the game is evolving. Things are changing. When you're running a defense that morphed from so long ago, I think it's only appropriate to change it. And been here for a few years now, so we've kind of morphed it to our players. Our system is morphed to what offenses we're going against, what the coordinators are attacking us with. And it's really changed from, we still call it the flex, but it's changed into its own entity entirely. And that just goes with how the game is changing. And it goes with me learning more football, learning more about what offenses want to get accomplished and what their rules are and how do we do things to take that away. And I think if you just take the flex or any system as it is without changing it, I think inevitably it's going to catch up to you, especially when you're at the same place for so long. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We based out of the flex, but we've really kind of morphed it into our own little baby here.
And for you, I think the leap forward, I guess, with this is, and we've talked to a lot of people about this on the podcast, but the pandemic was a time when we all paused and a lot of us stepped back and took a look at what we were doing and, studied more, dove deeper into things. We had time to go down rabbit holes and figure some things out. And for you, that's kind of how this continued to evolve and really, I guess, accelerated in its evolution to where you are today.
Yeah, that time was so critical for me. And, obviously we don't know at the time football was canceled and we're all kind of down, not playing, but it opened so many opportunities for me to really learn and evolve as a coach. I had just called the defense here for the first time and understood ball to a good amount, was confident in my abilities, but really having a chance to learn offense and learn what the offensive lineman rules are, not just pass protection, but run game, and really dive in deep to understand what they're trying to get accomplished and how could we break some of their rules or manipulate some of their rules. And that was huge for me. And so much became available during that time with online clinics and Zooms and so many opportunities where I joked, and it was in the article too, but I don't have a lot of hobbies. I love doing this. I love this profession. And most of my off time is studying and researching and find a way to get our guys better. So I really took advantage of that time and did whatever I could to really make myself a better coach, where in 2019, it was more so throwing darts, you're calling plays, and sometimes it works, sometimes you don't, but really able to find out, okay, why do we want to do things? What are our answers? And we came a lot more, if this, then this, and had a lot of answers built into our calls and really grew our playbook during that time to really help us turn this defense into what it is right now.
Yeah. And just reading a little bit about this, I think your process and what you did now, I realize probably when, I hope we never have a period like that where we're just not doing anything at all. So there's nothing else interrupting us from it. But I think that process, even if we do it in an abbreviated way, but taking time to step back and look at things in detail, I think can help anybody, no matter, whether you're a position coach or a coordinator or a head coach in whatever job you have to do, in looking at things that way. What was the process for you? What did you do during that time to really study the game and evolve what you're doing?
Yeah, well, part of it was the small network I had of really close friends. We kind of started a weekly Zoom session where different people spoke about different things. And, that was pretty consistent. So people that you're really comfortable with, where you could ask a lot of questions and you're not just sitting there listening to a recording or one of 100 people, you could really talk some ball. So talked to a lot of offensive line coaches during that time and just wanted to hear their protection rules and run game rules and how they look at different things, and just kind of got my creative juices flowing. But then so many online clinics became available and I studied so much offense and so much defense. And again, our defense has a lot of 4-down principles, 3-down principles, a lot of stack principles. So watch clinics of all different types of schemes and positions. And, I may listen to an hour clinic and take 1 or 2 things from it. And to me, that was worth it. And usually when they were recorded, you could listen to it at 2 times speed or, and pause it when you need to and rewind. So I just crushed whatever clinics I could find and got on as many Zooms as I could and just made sure I understood both sides of the ball as much as I could with the time we had. And then at the same time, sat down and thought about, okay, what is the word association? How could I build this in that makes sense for our guys here? And that's part of the fun, because we created this defense out of the flex, and a lot of the words that we use and techniques we use are personalized to us. And if you sit in our meeting rooms, you're going to hear some terminology that we created or we let our guys create to have some say in what we do. And it's not the same as everyone else uses, because we took so much from other schemes and people, and like anything, you steal a lot in this profession, and we just kind of made it our own, which was an awesome experience for us. But I really just took the time to learn as much football and talk with as many people as I could during that time where you're really just sitting at home with not much else to do.
Yeah, I think you hit on something very important there, is the structure, the terminology. And I see, for lack of maybe even knowing where to go, and I've done it before, like a lot of copy and paste, like, okay, this is what they call it, this is what we're going to call it too. And you learn it that way, but then you need some things too. And now the structure starts to deviate. And I think with anything, when you're looking at it, making sure you have a sound structure, you understand the terminology, the why, And I think you ask a lot of what if questions of, well, what if we see this? What if we need to do that? That's what went into rebuilding our system when I was at Baldwin Wallace in 2010 was instead of saying, okay, well, this is what we've been doing. I was here last year as the QB coach, and so we'll just keep this and move forward. We had a lot of, why do we call it this kind of conversations? And then a lot of what if things we weren't even planning on doing at the time. Like what if we wanted to have a 3-back offense? Not that we ever would, but how would that fit into our structure? And, we started to look at it and break it apart and think about how our terminology worked and how we could fit things together for learning. And we kind of called it, what we had was like a Lego set. And there were these little blocks of information that we could put together to be whatever we needed. Do we need to assemble a tank to run over things? Okay, we could do that. Do I need a rocket ship? I could do that as well. And, all of that is just kind of how do we evolve from year to year? So when you have a structure that allows you to move along a continuum, you have those kinds of answers built in. You may not have utilized them yet, but it's right there within your system.
That's exactly right. I think word association is so important as you're building it, especially when you're creating things for the first time in a program. It's easy to watch a clinic and say, okay, hey, this team ran it and they call it, X. Well, that may not fit for what we do. And if the kids are just memorizing everything, it's going to be really hard to add layers to your calls or really expand your playbook. So I think it really has to make sense. At the end of the day, we're teachers and we have to find a way to get it taught in a way where they could easily relate it to what their job is on the field, not to memorizing it out of a piece of paper in a playbook. And like you said, that is so much that goes into how we build it here is what do we have that's similar? What's the word family we could use? Is it rhyming? Is it animals? Is it whatever the category is? But that's part of the fun too. And I think when you include your players in that and give them some ownership of on a call, you got to give them some parameters and be able to say no sometimes, but they like to be able to name things or make up signals, and now it becomes theirs, and they feel a little bit more like they built this thing with you, which I think is really important.
Yeah, it's very important. Those guys having some ownership in it. Looking at the next part of this, I think is really, and maybe it's the first part of it. You got to have the structure, I guess, to fit it, but the people. And you have a lot of hybrid type of athletes. And what I love about this, I think, for me, this change started to happen around that same time as well, and breaking myself out of the box of, well, here's an X, here's a Y, here's a Z, here's what a tailback looks like, and realizing that, man, we got a lot of different types of skill sets in recruiting at the Division III level, which is also true any year in high school, how the guys you have in your building are the guys you have, that the system needs to be able to utilize skill sets. And when I got into thinking more about skill sets, I could see beyond X, Y, Z and the letters that we used to label our guys to start to see this kid here. He's not our typical what we would look for as a Z, but when we get into these situations or when we want to use this package, this guy fits really well on his skill set. And it's amazing when you start to do that. When you can figure out how every single guy might fit, have a role within your system, it's pretty cool with their buy-in and how they feel a part of it as well. I mean, it's very motivating for them. It kind of takes the verticality out of your depth chart in some ways, because if you have a certain skill, if you do certain things, we can account for that and how we're going to utilize you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the more players you could play and give a role, whether it's small or big, I think you get more buy-in and they become more attentive in practice. And also, I think there's so many guys in every program who are program guys, great young men, good football players, but didn't quite pass up the guy that's vertically in front of them in line. Like you said, the starting Mike may be an All-American and the backup Mike may be really, really good, but not good enough to beat him out. And a lot of programs, that guy's just watching or playing special teams. And when you could build in roles and packages and allow guys to play, I think it creates buy-in and make it feel like, hey, you have done right by us in this program. You're doing some really good things. You deserve to play. It may not be 80 snaps a game, but when they're in this personnel, I want you in the game at this position. And because our team allows people to be pretty versatile and multiple without having to fit the mold, right? And part of that is necessity. Part of what you brought up, a lot of our guys are kind of hybrids. Part of that is not just us as a Division II program, but a lot of Division I programs can't get the prototypical guys they want, right? I mean, everyone in the country wants the 6'2" corners. They all want the 6'3" defensive ends, and that's all great. But I'd rather take a guy that has the movement patterns to do what we ask him to do in our scheme and be a little bit shorter than have the guys that meet that criteria on paper, but can't function or move the way you want them to function in our system. And so we take a lot of those guys that don't necessarily have the ideal measurables. And part of it is that the scheme allows them to play on edges and not have to do some of the things they would have to in other schemes, but get those guys that are a little bit hungrier with not a lot of other opportunities, and they develop. And we're still very much a developmental program here, and we do it through the weight room and with high school players. But to see those kids who came in as walk-ons become All-Americans or starters and contributors, and guys that had nothing else going on come in and be able to play for us, I think is really rewarding, not just for them, but for us as well.
Now, I know you guys are able to expand and look at all kinds of different ways to utilize the personnel that you have, but could you describe, I guess, the day one base kind of thing you're putting in and what you look for in those guys who are playing defense for you?
Yeah, and we've kind of evolved. On paper, we're still a field and boundary defense. So, there's certain positions that go to the field that we look for different attributes to the boundary. But at the end of the day, where we are now, we pretty much are, with some positions, we're right and left, and they're pretty much symmetrical. So you just look at our base front. If you're looking at the offense is some kind of open formation, 10 personnel open formation, no tight ends. If you're looking at our front, we'll have two defensive ends that are standing up. They're in 2-point stances with their outside foot up, and playbook rules, they have 2 yards of width outside the tackle. So they're really like outside linebacker hybrids. In a perfect world, the boundary defensive end is a little bit more physical, a little stockier, probably going to play against tight ends a little bit more. And to the field, that's like your prototypical pass rusher, right? The guy that could really turn the corner and play on the edge. But they don't have to be huge, right? We don't do a lot of two gapping. We have some more physical techniques, but for the most part, we play them on edges. So they don't have to be really heavy or, really long arms. They have to be good athletes that could play on the edge and provide some mismatches to the tackles. Inside, we could be either double flex or single flex, meaning having two of those kind of hybrid flex linebackers in the game or having just one of them. Our base and what we prefer is to have two of them. If we do that, we're field and boundary. Our field flex linebacker is usually the more physical. He'll probably be rushing a little bit more. He'll be flexed off the ball, about 2 yards off the ball. We really tell him when the ball is snapped, you should be at the heel line of the defensive line. These guys disguise a lot for us and move around, and we give them a lot of freedom. But if they're stagnant, they're about 1.5 yards, 2 yards off the ball. Their inside foot is up, and they're right in the middle of the B gap. So that's kind of where the flex 3 technique evolved into a stand-up flex linebacker. So the boundary is symmetrical. There's another flex linebacker in a similar position. That guy is usually a little bit more athletic. He'll do a little bit more of the covering and the dropping. Usually he calls our defense in terms of how we line up front, where we're blitzing from, all that stuff. So he's a little bit more cerebral. And then our D tackle is the only one in an open formation with his hand down. So he'll be tilted and shaded on either side of the center, and that's based on his skill set and what we ask him to do. If he's a real heavy guy that doesn't move well, he'll be closer to what looks like a 0. If he's more athletic, he'll get a little bit more width to him and put his pinky on the ball to be a shade. He's got to be physical. He's got to get his hands on the center. He's got to be a little bit more stout, more physical in there. He won't be playing on edges as much as everybody else, but we will allow him to play on the edge and move and all that stuff as well. If we're single flex, we'll take a flex linebacker out and put in a true 3 technique. He won't really be flexed off the ball much with what we do. He'll be more hand and down, either playing 3 technique or 4-eye based on what we're doing schematically. So really it's a 5-man front, essentially a bare front, just with 2 linebackers instead of the tackle standing up. And then if it's a 1-back set, we'll have our Mike standing behind them. Most offenses identify him as a safety. We still call him a Mike. He's a undersized linebacker. He'll be toes at 6 yards, usually in between the quarterback and tailback with his horizontal alignment. But he's kind of your free hitter, your sideline to sideline runner. He's got to be able to occupy, be able to run laterally and eat a lot of ground. Has to be your best tackler. Does not need to be a thumper, real traditional Mike linebacker, but has to be able to run the alley and be a great tackler. So that's kind of our front configuration. And then, we're 1 high, at least pre-snap, we're 1 high behind it, where our DBs and our rover are covering down on the receivers, and our free safety is somewhere near the middle of the field, depending on the call.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing what that looks like I saw quite a few offensive guys who were quoted there saying, we're really not sure how to handle this scheme. We're really not sure what they're doing. I mean, it feels like in a lot of ways, and I saw the one clip there, but it's almost like you guys are in creepers or in sims every single down.
Yeah. And a lot of people get into this front on third down, at all levels. I know the Patriots did it for a long time and do a lot of similar stuff on third down. It became more popular on third down, but we have found a way to really stop the run on base downs and have multiple ways to do it and present different pictures to the offense. While for us, it's really simple and a lot of same as teaching, but like we have very simple tags to get the DNs to switch with the flexes, whether it's to the back, away from the back, both sides, field boundary, whatever, and present what looks like a different front to the offense. But to us, it's just a simple tag to get two guys to switch and still do the same job we had the other guy doing. So to become multiple and seem very chaotic while actually being pretty simple, easy to teach and easy to learn, but present as very chaotic and very confusing. And then the difference between what we do in a traditional bear front is in a traditional bear front or tight front, you have three guys with their hand down that, they could move and stem pre-snap, but you pretty much know where they're going to be, where, our guys are standing up so they could do three technique things or they could do linebacker things. And you don't really know which one you're going to get on a given play. We're doing it right. We're mixing it up enough. It could present as pretty chaotic to an offense.
So presenting to an offense and being chaotic to them is important. How do you keep, especially something with as much flexibility as you have, how do you keep it straight in your mind? How do you organize thought processes so there's no chaos in your mind for your guys that is just simple?
Well, I think it goes back to first word association. Like we have to have tags to our calls that could easily tell our guys what to do because the word makes sense. And then there's a lot of same as teaching. We do a lot of our teaching, like in most schemes, your base is reactionary, right? Like you have to be able to play technique and react to what an offensive lineman is doing. And there's, only so many things the offensive lineman could do, but you have to be great at defending all those things. And it's very hard to play D-tackle with all those reactions and then go play five technique with all those reactions. If you're the same person, that becomes overwhelming. But we have a lot of same as teaching. So it doesn't matter, like the tag is going to tell me where to line up, but it's the same technique that I did on a guard or a tackle or a center. And the word tells them what to do and who to do it against. But there shouldn't be a lot of, okay, hey, now I want you to do this over here and do something that you've never done before. It's no, the same exact thing you do on this play, you're doing it in these 10 other calls. So our kids could put things into categories. Hey, everything that starts with an S, if I'm the defensive end, I'm doing this one technique. And now we may have, I don't know, I'm making up a number. We may have 100 different variables of calls. But if we break it down right and do it right with word association, the kid could put it into categories. Like our one technique, he knows I'm either call hand down or I'm to the call. Meaning if I hear right, in these 30 calls, I'm putting my right hand down and then doing X, Y, Z. And then in these other calls, I'm going to the right. And we just put them into simple categories. And again, it falls back on us being teachers of we want to be able to present very chaotic, but we don't want to slow our own kids down. So how do we find a way to word it in such a way that makes sense to them? And if anything ever doesn't make sense, if the kid kind of gives you that look, we take pride as coaches, say, okay, let me rewind and reword this and find a way to make this make more sense because it's our job for them to understand it. And if they're not, we got to make sure, there's no such thing in our mind as, no, this is the way it's going to be, so learn it. We have to find a way to, as we're creating it ourselves, for our players to understand and make sure that they're not being slowed down.
In looking at how you practice some of these, obviously, maybe not fitting everything individual position wise into the traditional boxes. There's different skill sets guys are going to use to blitz or drop, whatever they're going to do, play the run, fit the run from different positions. How do you make sure that you're practicing all those things over the course of the week? Is there anything in your practice structure that maybe is a little bit different because of the way you guys structure things?
Yeah, we're big on circuits. A lot of positions in our defense do a lot of the same techniques, whether it's against the same people or not. They do a lot of the same techniques. So we do a lot of circuit teaching where usually we have 3 stations and that could change. It does change every day on what the emphasis is, but we do a lot of circuit teaching. So the guys are hearing from the coach on our staff with the most expertise on that specific technique. They're learning from them on how to do it. Because so many guys do so many different things in our system, it's not fair for our DB coach to have to coach the best blitz techniques and strip sack techniques and shedding techniques for their DBs, when our D-line coach is more of a master at that. So we do a lot of circuit teaching. And then the way we do Indy, our head coach here gives us a lot of Indy time, which is awesome. So we split some of that into circuits. And then some of that is like our flex linebackers. They're the most hybrid position we have. So sometimes, they'll be with me. I coach our Mikes and our Rovers, and we'll be working on more of the coverage aspect. And then other times they'll be with our D-line coach, working on more of the pass rush, run game, blitzing, closer to the line of scrimmage stuff. So we don't just say, okay, flexes, you are always with the flex linebacker coach no matter what. We try to split them up to get them with the people that are going to teach them the best techniques that they need to know. And that way, when we get to team or 7-on-7 or whatever, they've already been taught all the tools that they need to know. And because the play call could change drastically for what someone may drop one play and then go against a guard the next play. And a lot of our coaches are young to really master everything. So we do a lot of circuit teaching, and then we kind of move guys around in Indy based on what the emphasis is and what we're installing.
Because the last thing we want to dig into here is game planning from the coach's perspective. Obviously, you have the ability to do a lot of things, to present a lot of things. When you're looking at putting together the game plan, ultimately, again, you need to make sure that it's simple, that your guys are playing fast on game day. What's the filter for looking through and determining, hey, here's how much we can carry this week, here's the things that apply, without, I guess, not getting into specifics, but kind of getting into process?
Yeah, the way I think of it is we could present like we're doing a lot more. We have the same pressure pass or movement that we like. Let's say the top run we're playing is inside zone that week, right? Well, we have kind of our categories of here's our inside zone beaters on defense. Here's the movement we like up front to stop inside zone. And we have ways to do those same pass and play man coverage behind it. We could do those same pass and play, a 2-trap version behind it. So even though we look like we're putting a lot on our game plan on Saturdays, we're really doing similar stuff. And maybe one or two people changing, but we're trying to get the same thing accomplished because of what the offense has shown that their tendencies are. I think the most challenging thing with our defense is because we're so different, we break so many rules of the offense. Oftentimes, let's say inside zone, that's a play that doesn't really scare us in our system, but that may be 90% of a team's offense. Well, we know a team is not just going to be stubborn and say, well, I'm going to keep trying to run inside zone. They're going to have some kind of wrinkle or new install or something that we've never seen before because they need to try to adjust to our system. So for us, the challenging part is on game days, we have to be great at identifying what is the wrinkle that they're doing this week that they've never done before. How are they trying to attack us? And is our game plan still really good? Or do we have to have some adjustments? So we will always practice some things that we'll install in fall camp. And if we have a couple calls in our system where we know, okay, this is good versus everything. This may not be great right now versus what they're going to do based on what we've seen on film, but we always have to have it in our back pocket because if they go to X, Y, Z, we have to be able to have answers. So it's kind of like playing against the triple option on offense. They're going to see such different adjustments on defense every week. You're not going to see the same scheme that teams run against 10 and 11 personnel teams. So they need to do a good job of looking at their Rolodex and saying, okay, they're playing us this way, so here's the plays that we need to run. It's just kind of flipped on our side. Okay, what are they attacking us with? What are our answers? And our D-line coach Figner and I, we joke because we may practice against their top runs all week and then not see it but 5 times all game. So we always joke about, okay, what are we going to get this week? And what do we got to pull out of our hat to figure out a way to stop it? Which, again, makes it fun. And I still think it's in our favor because you rep something thousands of times in fall camp, and then all of a sudden the week you're playing us, are you going to really create a new scheme and really get good at the timing and everything it takes in 4 days and a walkthrough to get it done?
Coach, I really appreciate you giving us a peek into what you do and what you've developed there at Seton Hill. Certainly would love to have you back again and talk some more defense. But best of luck to you and the Griffins here in 2024.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Here are winning edge takeaways and ideas for implementation. 1, adapt and evolve your systems. Coach May discussed how his defense is rooted in a traditional flex defense, but has evolved significantly to suit the needs of his team and the challenges of the different offenses that they face over the course of the season. By adapting their foundational principles to fit their personnel and to go up against their different opponents, the innovation is achieved by maintaining some of those things in the original system, but being creative with it. This evolution involves incorporating new techniques and strategies that align with the specific strengths and weaknesses of the team. 2, utilize downtime for deep learning. The pandemic gave us that downtime. There's so many coaches that have been on the podcast and talked about how that was huge in them really getting into something, studying and changing the way that they do things. And that was what Coach May shared with us as well. But think about that as you roll around to the next offseason, is building in that downtime. Obviously, it won't be as long as we had in the pandemic, but what can you do to pull away, to take a deeper look at things and understand things better so you can move forward and evolve and improve your systems? And 3, incorporate player input and personalization. Players remember things because they're involved in the process. It may seem a little bit off to you. It may seem even funny with some of the names that they come up with, but they're going to remember those probably better than the ones that you come up with. So involve them in that learning, involve them in helping create the terminology, give them some parameters for how it has to work with structure, but let them put their own spin on it so it becomes personal to them, so they're empowered really to be a part of it and to own part of that process as well. Be sure to visit coachandcoordinator.com and check out the 10% Toolkit, which highlights our partners and some of the offers they have to you as a listener. The link to that is in the show notes. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.